AWCA, Mike Amori. Welcome to the 4 o'clock update, week 6. You're going to see a game played between Rohan and Ivan. Rohan with white, Ivan with black. We're looking at a position where it is Ivan's move on move 5. And hopefully before you looked at this video, rather, you already read the blog, so you know what you were looking for here. So we're going to see as this game progresses the idea of playing where you have space, and also ideas about when it's okay and not okay to move pawns in front of your castled king. Those are only a couple of things that I could have pointed out. This game was really, really complicated, and there was a lot to talk about. So I'm going to try to narrow it down a little bit to make it a little more instructive. So from the black side, Ivan plays c5 here, which is a very natural move. You need to put some pressure on the white center. Rohan plays b3, which kind of controls the c4 square right here. Hopefully you can see that mouse toggling, and it keeps that pawn from pushing so easily, and also opens a square for his dark squared bishop. And here, right away, Ivan releases the tension with a pawn capture. It is perfectly playable. As a matter of fact, when I went over this game with ChessBase, there were already 1,500 ChessBase users who have looked at this very position on their computers. And at this point in the game, it was very instructive because Ivan played a move that is really not looked at much from this position. And he played the move bishop to b4. Now, it's perfectly playable. If you have an engine running looking at this, you'll see that black is fine in this position. But what bothered me, or what made me think about why there weren't that many players. So we went from like 1,500 and change to down to about 190 people that looked at this position. What does that mean exactly? Well, it just means that bishop b4 doesn't seem to give black the best future going forward. Not bad, just not best. But again, as students of chess, why? So Rohan responds with bishop to b2, and here the people that have looked at this position from this far seem to think that black should have played knight to d5. If we go back to bishop b4 and answer that question specifically, why not bishop b4, I think the answer would have been revealed with simply castling. And by doing that, this bishop is kind of out here in the wind, and eventually it's going to get kicked back by something. The way the game was played, however, after bishop b4, once bishop b2 came on the board, perhaps here Ivan could have thrown the move knight d5 in, which may have been part of his idea originally, but he should have followed through with this move, because by doing that, you're putting a lot of pressure on this c3 square. So, if that knight gets challenged with bishop to e4, you can see the c3 square is really, really weak. Just continue developing with black, and then if that knight ever gets kicked, you can just throw the knight into the middle of the position. And this is not an easy knight to tolerate for white. And of course, if it comes off, you would have this kind of position. Even if the bishop gets chased away, black has 2 bishops now, and if I were playing black, I would think about putting this thing on b4 and keeping it, because it's an unopposed bishop. So that might have been like a way to go. So even though Ivan played a move that's not looked at much, his opponent did not respond the best way. And again, the best response may have been just to castle and then eventually kick this bishop. But if you follow through right away with the fianchetto of the dark square bishop, then all of a sudden knight d5, and black is the one that's kind of, taking charge a little bit. But after bishop b2, Ivan plays a good move. He plays d5, which changes things a little bit because he's naturally, locking out his light square bishop, but he has a pawn firmly planted in the center. Well, it looks really good. The other deal with this pawn on d5 is it firmly keeps the d pawn on d4. So you see what those central pawns are doing to each bishop? because they both fianchettoed on the queen side, correct? Really, really good chess. Okay, white's turn. A3, kicking the bishop. Do we trade for the knight down here? Probably not. If you take it, the queen's going to take, you're helping white develop, and you're just handing them the dark squares for really no purpose. So what does he do? Yeah, Ben, I know you just pointed. You guys ever wonder why every time I say purpose, Ben personally points at me? Yeah, we'll save that for another day. So Ivan's turn, he retreats to d6. Okay, white's turn. Good move by Rohan. Queen e2. Now the cool thing about this position, because the players have kind of splintered and went off on their own, there are only 2 chess space users who have looked at this position. And I think they're both me. So it just shows you how original chess can become. So after queen to e2, he's got a couple of reasons. One, he's stopping this knight from centralizing itself on e4 because you'll just lose a pawn. And you know, I don't think Rohan's going to castle queenside into this open c file, but it does at least have the rooks connected after he's castled. Ivan's turn, a5. And I like his move because he's playing on the side of the board where he has more space. And I'm going to turn this board around in a minute and show you what I'm talking about. Knight e5 by Rohan. Is he breaking one of the opening rules that we learned? Don't move the same piece twice in the opening unless you've completed your development, blah, blah, blah. Well, castling is supposed to be completing your development. So here Rohan is just plunking the knight in on e5. He didn't castle yet. But I think it's justified because the center is so firmly closed that, you know, there's no way for Ivan to take advantage of Rohan's king being in the middle. And so he just puts the knight in the middle of the board. But now Rohan's idea is revealed. And I'm going to turn the board around here for a second. Absolutely amazing how quickly I do that. When Ivan played the move a5, let's go back to a5, before Rohan puts the knight in the middle, he had a very clear, specific reason to do that. And it's revealed now by the fact that this bishop here on b7 is hitting a brick wall. So what Ivan did is he allows knight to e5, but then instantly plays bishop to a6. And the idea is to simply trade that piece off. Now, he's kind of saving a tempo because he did not move the knight on b8. And Rohan goes ahead and takes that bishop. And by taking it, he takes back with the knight, Ivan. So now he's got his knight developed. But if you heard my voice, developed, yeah, it is a little sarcastic. It does have a little bit of wonder to it, my voice, because the knight on a6, you can argue, is not well placed. However, he did get rid of a bad bishop, and also the knight is on the side of the board where Ivan should probably be playing. Let's go a little bit deeper. However, now, after this trade, right, it's Rohan's turn. He castles. Now, watch this. I'm going to back that move up. It's white's turn. Let's flip the board. Here's a choice that Rohan decided not to make. What did our old, well, she's not old, but our old founder, Rusa, always say to us? Look at every check and capture. Well, there's a check. And that's the kind of check that can be very disruptive because if you don't want to trade pieces, you're going to have to displace your king. But if Rohan goes in for this, let's say Ivan blocks with knight to d7 and now Rohan castles, if you decide to go down this route, you could get hit with knight c7. So now that knight that was misplaced moves towards the center with a tempo, and if Rohan decides to trade everything, all of a sudden you have a completely different game. Now, the argument, is the black king well placed on d7? That's something you should pause your video and answer yourself. And don't just answer it off the top of your head. Look at the specifics of the position. Is that king well placed or not? The computers, if you put this on a computer, think the game is completely equal. However, you know, we're not computers, we're humans. Rohan, who has an attacking concept in his mind, is now playing a position that is completely opposite to the one you're going to see in the game. So you need to look at that check, but you also need to ask yourself, do I really want to play an endgame in this position? Look at a couple of things from here. Number one, look at the two dark square bishops. Who does that favor and why? Let's look at another one. You see the half open files? Black has the C file, white has the E file. If you look at the ends of those files, so the E file here, it's open for white, right? Here's the contact point. I'll highlight these for you. The E6 square is the first thing that this rook is going to hit. It's defended 3 times. Now look at the perspective from black. If you put a rook on C8, you're hitting a pawn right now that is not protected at all. So, I mean, can you make the argument that perhaps the half-open files favor black as well, and the fact that this is kind of morphing into an endgame might also favor black? And that's why if you put this on a computer, instead of white having a small advantage, not a big one, a small one, now it's thinking that maybe black is a slightly better placed for this. It's amazing. It's the same game. Let's go back to it. In this position, after the light square bishops came off, Rohan just castles. Ivan castles. And now Rohan is going to demonstrate an attacking structure that he knows very well. He plays the move pawn f4. This is a post-up move. That's like a basketball term, where you're kind of cementing the knight on e5. The f pawn is used not only to cement the knight, possibly to play f5. It also allows for a rook lift, and it also allows for the queen to come to this side of the board without blocking the f-pawn. Same with this knight. I hope that stuff is clear. It's not for free, because Rohan gave away the e4 square, but for Ivan, he has to be extremely careful in this position, because after f4, Rohan is signaling that he's going to play on what side of the board. If you need to pause the video to answer that question, you're in the wrong class. It is clear Rohan is coming for Ivan's king. Now, let's turn the board around. What is Ivan supposed to do here? Again, if you put this on a computer, the computer is not saying anything that white is winning, nothing close to winning, because it thinks or it calculates that black has chances. As a human, we need to ask ourselves, where are our chances? What part of the board should I be looking for to play in? Well, the center is really locked up. The only way you can change the central structure is by trading this bishop for the knight, which I don't think on the surface helps Ivan much at all, right? Okay, so where do we play? How about a move like a4? Looks completely senseless on the surface, but why do we even consider this move? Well, what to do for white after the move a4? If you push past, perfectly fine. You've given away the c4 square. You guys see that? So here's a4. If you take the pawn, now a move like queen c8. Why? Pretty simple. Putting some pressure on the open line. Let's say black, the pawn gets defended rather by a move like rook there to c1. Now we swing our knight around, and all of a sudden it's like you have an open file pointing at a pawn, and in the future, you can't do it right away, you're going to just replace your pieces really well. Let's look at this move a4 again and add another highlight. Okay, so there's the move a4 on the board from the game. You see Ivan's pawn chain? That's not always, but usually a very good indicator of where you should be playing. You look at the bottom of the chain and draw an arrow to the opposite side of the board. That almost always tells you where you have the most space. And it's pretty clear in this position that Ivan has squares and files on the queen side. So in the future, Ivan, you could think about playing this way. Now, the move he played After f4, now we're looking at this from Ivan's perspective. Rohan just plunked that pawn on f4. Is he played knight to d7? His idea was to challenge this piece on e5, maybe even by playing f6 someday. But you got to be careful with moves like f6 because it's going to weaken the e-pawn. He's challenging Rohan. But Rohan, after that move, just plays queen to g4. And the problem in the position for Ivan is when he takes the knight, did the trade favor Ivan or Rohan? We understand his plan, but the problem is after the trade, he takes back with the e-pawn, the d-pawn rather, Rohan. What was the reason for the trade? How did it help Ivan? How did it help Rohan? These are critical positions and ideas in games because all of a sudden, Ivan is now faced with the fact that he no longer has a knight protecting his king. Number one, he's still fine here. He can still hold on, but I want him to understand that he's kind of playing into Rohan's hand a little bit here. So what he does with his bishop is he throws an in-between check. And in this position, Rohan was happy to see that check because King h1 is a move that white very often plays in these kinds of structures. Again, why? Why would the white king want to move away from the g1 square? Well, what part of the board is Rohan going to be playing on? The king side. Let's flip the board again. When Ivan checks the king into the corner, you can bet your bottom dollar that this g-pawn is going to come flying up the board. And you're going to say, hey, you can't move pawns in front of your king. Well, yes, you can if the center is closed and if that pawn can help checkmate the other king. Now, watch what happens. After the check, Ivan plays a good move. He plays knight to c7, trying to get the knight into the game. He could try moves like g6, just trying to stop this f-pawn from moving forward and hope that he can get this bishop in here at some point or the queen to cover the dark squares. He could have tried queen e7, and then if Rohan continues with his plan, he can just simply take that pawn. And then let's say you take back with the rook, and now queen here. And all of a sudden, let's say rook a to f1. You know, that's a very natural move. Then a very important idea, bishop to e3, which is kind of threatening to get rid of one of the attacking units and also maybe coming back to the h6 square to control the square in front of the king. It's a very important move to play, but the timing has to be right. In the game, after knight to c7, it allows Rohan to follow with one of his ideas. What was it? f5. Ivan is still okay, but this was the time, the last chance he had actually to move a pawn sort of near his king, and he should have taken that pawn right away. And there's two reasons for that. One, it's hitting the queen here on g4. It's a tempo, correct? Two, once the rook takes, or if the queen, doesn't matter, the knight is the perfect blockader of this pawn. And all of a sudden, with the knight on e6, the attack, look at this bishop blocked out of the game, is not so scary. This position is so equal. There's so many chances. But what happened is, after f5, now Ivan decides to put the bishop on e3. The timing was wrong because it allowed what move? f6. And once that pawn gets to the 6th rank near that king, with this much power behind it, Ivan was in big trouble. It's that simple. One tempo. Now he played g6. But the problem with that move is, after knight f3, once the queen gets to this square, the game's over. Well, how do you avoid that? Ivan tried to chase the queen away, but now he's moving a pawn in front of his king, right? Well, we understand his intention, queen g3. Now he plays bishop h6. He probably should have just put his king there, just to maybe save a tempo, because after bishop to c1, if you take it, rook takes, it's black's turn. Black has just enough time to play rook h8, which will protect the h6 square if the king ever gets attacked by the queen. I know this position is bad for black, but at least he's still alive. What happened in the game was the complete opposite. Let's look carefully. After queen g3, Ivan brings his bishop back to h6. It has nowhere to go. So Rohan played an excellent move that just wins the game, bishop to c1. And he's trading his bad bishop for the only piece that was left to defend the king. Bishop takes, rook takes, king h7, knight g5 check. The game is pretty much over. King h8, and now queen h4. You see the lines? It's that simple. There's no play for black. I think Ivan tried knight e8, and then that's it. Just open the game, and the rest is history. I don't want to show it to you. Really well played. Very instructive. Look, I know it's a long video, but I really, really hope that you were pausing along the way and thinking about these ideas, because this is really the kind of chess we're looking to play, okay, and to learn from. I'll see you guys. Have a happy Thanksgiving.